This is part 4 of our oral history with Steve Melnikoff. It's Saturday, August 15th, 2009. Steve, we were just talking about being in the Bremen Enclave and the end of the war in Europe. And it sounds like you're an army of occupation now at this point. How long are you stationed there still? How long are you still there for?
Well, let me say this. Soon after we got there, they developed a system of points to ship back to the States. Well, right away, these old timers, they had a lot of points because they gave like a point for every month in the service and 2 points for every month in Europe and 3 points or something. That's not exactly the way it was probably. And 3 points for every combat and 5 points for every Purple Heart. And so these guys that were in this army, for Christ, they were in the army from 1941 to 1945, 4 years. So they had a lot of these points, so they started to send them home. So they would send home, and we would have to be there, and we would get depleted. And while I was there, when I was there, one of the old guys, Gene Kokovich, he had charge of the 3rd platoon. So when he went home, I was a staff sergeant, so I became tech sergeant, and that became my platoon because he went home. No, I take it back. He didn't go home. He moved up to 1st sergeant because 1st sergeant went home, and I moved up to tech sergeant because he moved from tech sergeant up to 1st sergeant. And then in a little while, you know, all these older guys are going home, and then my turn finally came. Well, actually, I was acting 1st sergeant for a while because the 1st sergeant went home, and there were no more. All the old guys were gone. All the sergeants were gone, and then the old sergeant, and so then I became acting 1st sergeant, and my turn came in October, and I went home in October.
How'd you get home?
I came home on a Taurus Victory in October. Probably, let's see, when did I get home? I don't know. Well, but anyway, it was, yeah, I got home in October. It was October that I got home because I had quite a bit of points because I had the 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts, and my whole career in the service was only less than 28 months. But 22 months of it was overseas. So I had a lot of points. You had double points for every overseas month and 3 points for every month in combat. So I went home, and then so many guys were going home for the 29th that they started to move in guys from the 69th Division to fill up the vacancies. 69th Division. I came on a Taurus Victory, took the southern route. It was a lot slower because you were in a Victory ship, and we went to Fort Dix, and I was out of the Army out of Fort Dix.
Fort Dix?
Fort Dix.
And this is October 45? November,
Yeah,
October 45. So you get to Fort Dix.
Yes.
It's your first time back to the States at
Yes.
this point. All right, and they discharge you from Fort Dix?
Yep.
And they put you on a bus and send you home? How'd you get home?
Yeah, by bus or train, one or the other.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they sent me home. Yeah.
Right, and home is where?
Woonsocket, Rhode Island.
All right.
I'll go back to Woonsocket, Rhode Island.
All right, how are you greeted upon your return home?
Oh, Christ, my mother was just, the family was, everybody, when you get home, you know, they had monuments for you, and the people were nice, because, but so many, you know, I can remember my yearbook, high school yearbook, and there's a page there around the K's. And like like there's 2 pages with about 12 pictures in there, about 4 of them girls. About 8 guys never come back from our class. Because see, we were class of 1937. We were 18 years old in 1937. So these guys were all 20 years old, you know, and they were all Christ guys that I knew were pilots and torpedo bombers and officers. Whole bunch of guys just did. But yes, there's a monument in the city where they had all those. So what I did, when I got back, I went to work for Bethlehem Steel in the shipyard again.
Okay.
And I worked a little bit, and then it would start letting people off. And finally, Unfortunately, it was, I think after the school year started,
Mm-hmm.
in 1946, when they laid me off, and they said, well, we'll call you. Well, so I looked for a job, and then I heard that the veterans had a service, I don't know what they called it. Anyways, the Department of Veterans. So I went down there and told them that I wanted what could I do for them? And they said, well, they could put me in a program. So they gave me, they tested me, gave me, tests, whatever you kind of test. What do you call those?
Yep. Yeah, sort of aptitude test.
Aptitude test, right. And the IQ test and all that, whatever it was. And anyhow, so this VA guy says, well, Steve, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'm not sure, but I want to do something because I'm not going back to the shipyard. And he said, well, I said, well, maybe I want to be a carpenter. Maybe television was just starting to roll. I said, maybe I want to be a television, operator, camera operator, something like that, train. He said, I don't know. He says, how about being a mechanical engineer? I says, what? Are you kidding me? He says, no. He says, you can go to engineering school. And I says, 10 years after I graduated from high school, he says, you could take engineering. I says, really? He says, yeah. He says, you passed all these tests. He says, you're not going to have a problem. I said, okay. So that's what I did. So I applied to different schools. Brown, Northeastern, Rhode Island, and I can remember, and the schools were small, They don't have a whole lot of us GIs, want to go to school. So, 2 consecutive Saturdays at the University of Rhode Island, they had tests, and so we go in there. All us veterans, plus all the 18-year-old kids, 17-year-old kids were taking these tests. And I don't remember what it was, the top 10 or top 20% could go to school, the rest couldn't. And they said I could go, so I went. Went to Rhode Island, took mechanical engineering, and it was so tight that the first year, we had our classes in a high school in Providence because there wasn't any room down on the campus for us. There wasn't any room, let alone places to sleep. There wasn't any room in the classrooms. So the first year we go at Providence, and sophomores we go down to Kingston. But I decided that I'm going to get married. And in October we got married. My wife and I, and Joyce, and October 2nd, and we talked to her father. He said, "Oh, why don't you graduate from college and then all that happy stuff?" I said, "No, we got to get married now." So anyway, we got married. My folks were upset that I'd marry a Ukrainian, Polish girl, and her folks were upset that she didn't marry an English girl,
Yeah.
because you had that ethnic things in those days, And to get married. A year later, my son appears, and then another about 14 months later, my second son comes.
Oh, that's
We
nice.
graduated, mechanical engineer, 4 of us, my wife and 2 kids and I.
You were busy. There you go. Four of you with a degree.
So that's what happened, and my wife was a registered nurse, and we worked hard. We worked together. She was very good, and we worked together. And I told her, while we were doing this thing, I said, the first thing I got to do is, hon, we got to graduate as a mechanical engineer. If I graduate as a mechanical engineer, we'll have it made. And so that's what happened.
How did you come back down to the Baltimore area? How did that evolve out?
Well, I had offers from Philco in Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
had offers from Boulevard Watch in Providence had an offer from Bethlehem Steel
Mm-hmm.
and an offer from IBM. And I wanted to go to IBM, and they said I had to work in New York City. And Joyce says, I'm not taking the kids to New York. He says, we're not going to take that. And so I tried to talk IBM into going to Boston or Providence or some other, place that would have been more acceptable to my wife. And they said I had to go to New York. And so I passed that up, and then I accepted one Bethlehem. And then they gave me a choice of going to Buffalo, New York, or Sparrows Point, and I didn't want Buffalo with all the snow, so I come down to Bethlehem Steel and Sparrows Point, come to Baltimore.
What year was that you arrived to Baltimore?
What
year? What year did you come?
1951.
51.
Yeah, I graduated class of 51. By the time I graduated from school, in 1951, Rhode Island was a university. That's how much they expanded, over that period of time.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I think Tom Brokaw misses a key point here, is he calls us the great generation,
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why, because none of us, a lot of the kids that I went to school with, we never would have gone to college, because it was, beyond our means, But what happens, I think, is the government gave us this great thing, but they didn't realize that they figured maybe a couple of 100,000 guys will go to college, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we screwed them. Millions of us wanted to go. And so what happened, and that's the point I think he misses, the government, state and federal, has got to provide all this. They started to build all these schools, like, dormitories and labs, and like in Rhode Island and all the other places. And then the college school system probably jumped from whatever they were, they probably quadrupled in size, or maybe even more. And then that gave the openings to all the other kids to go to school, which you never had room for before. There was too much competition before. And I think he missed the point there. And the other thing was, well, every one of us that went to school had a purpose. I was going to be a mechanical engineer. Tony was going to be an electrical engineer, and somebody else was going to be a business administration. And when we went to those schools, I think we changed the atmosphere of the schools. It was not a playground anymore. We were in there to learn, and that's what we did. And I think that's where he misses the point, that we were more mature people going to school.
You really were. And so you're going to school, and you've got a family, and then you're working. You just transitioned right away into that life.
Yeah.
And you moved down here to the Baltimore area, and had a very successful life and career here. What about contact with the 29th Infantry Division after the war?
Well, that's a funny thing. Here I was in Baltimore, and I never knew there was a 29th Division Association. On the 40th anniversary, my wife reads in the Evening Sun, there's going to be a dedication of a monument at the 5th Regiment Army for the 29th Division. And she says, why don't you go, Steve? So I go down there. It took 40 years before I found out there was even an association. I didn't know.
Would you have been involved with it? Have you had known?
I might have.
Yeah. Okay.
I might have, but I didn't know.
Uh-huh.
Because after that, then in a couple of years, then I became involved with it. So that not. At least I joined, and I would go to. I went to a number of conventions, and I stopped going to convention mainly because when I first went there, there'd be like 8 or 10 people I knew, and then now the last couple of years, the only one guy I really know is Sam Krause and Bill Doyle.
Yeah. Because
all the rest of the guys are gone now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to this one, and I don't know how many guys will show up. There's probably not many.
Did you choose to go back? They had a dedication ceremony at the Vierville Draw in 1988. Did you choose to go that year to go back to France?
No. Let me say this. I've talked a lot to you, and I've talked a lot to my kids, But it was a great many years before I talked about anything that happened in the war.
Why?
I think there was a lot of things that I probably was afraid I'd say. Might have brought memories back to me. I thought very strongly of going to 50 anniversaries, and I wasn't sure that I could handle it. I really felt that way at the time. I was afraid that, you know, you make friends fast in a service, you know, and they're your buddies. They really are, and you know, and you see them go, and it's kind of like brings all that back, you know, and I didn't talk about it, and just in the last number of years that I've talked much about it, and so finally I decided I would go on the 60th, and now I think I somehow or other my mental system has probably blocked out. Like I can tell you stuff. Well, I don't remember much about that period. I don't remember what you. Maybe that was done intentionally somehow. I don't know, but there's a lot of things that maybe my mind doesn't want to remember, and I can't tell you about. You know, and I wouldn't tell you about it.
It's okay.
You know, that's the way I feel. You know, there's certain things that are just untellable. You know, like.
None of us can relate to what you went through. Only you can.
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
only what you can share with us.
Yeah,
Which
and-
is.
Like I'll say people like this person was killed or this person was hurt, but I don't tell you much about, or don't tell people much how or when, you know, how bad it was or what. I just don't feel that that's. I don't get into that. But now I think somebody ought to know, because look, it took 65 years for them to make a monument for Hill 108,
Yeah.
and look how many years it took before they put a monument down for the veterans of World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a monument for the Vietnam War. They had a monument for the Korean War. They never had one for a monument for the World War II guys. I mean, that doesn't sound right for some reason, you know. Of course, it probably is our fault for not thinking about it, but maybe whatever.
Your visit back on the 60th, you decided to go. How did that all come about?
Well, I wanted to go, but my wife had bad leg, and she was kind of limping around a little bit, and she wasn't sure that she could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was about 12 or 13 days, you know, whatever it was, and a lot of moving up and down from the bus and that. And she went to the hairdresser's one day, and the hairdresser talked her into going. So around April, she said to me, "Steve, let's go." I said, "Well, wait a minute, hon." So I called Fran. Fran says, "All the hotel rooms are sold, Steve. Would you go and stay with French families?" I said, "Yeah, we'll do that." So my kids and I stayed with 3 different families. And so this time, because my wife's not with me, and my son Steve lost his wife about 3 years ago,
I'm sorry.
so we stayed with the same couple.
This was for the 65th anniversary.
65th,
the 65th. Now, the 60th, I've seen a videotape that your daughter has done of you. It's a beautiful video of your time there,
Right.
with you talking and sharing some of the same things you've shared today on
Right.
the videotape. Was it a nice visit for you, going back for that 60th? Was it happy?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I feel that the people in Normandy are wonderful. I mean, they treat the 29ers, and I'm sure they treat the 1st Division and 4th Division, you know, in their different areas, because
Sure.
we liberated them. They were captive audience of the Germans. You know, they were oppressed. You know, they stole their food and, you know, land and homes. They had to live in basements and whatnot. So they appreciate the fact that we come over, and I don't feel like I did anything special. I just went over there because they told me to go, you know, and but I appreciate how those people feel, and I don't feel anything special. Sometimes I almost feel a little bit embarrassed, you know, that they all, you know, think so much of that when that's like so we sort of like doing our job, you know, but I think that was a good one. I think we had 5 or 6 buses went on that one.
For the 60th?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a whole mess of veterans, you know, because now more of a crippled up and going. And
Yeah, it gets harder, as they get.
And I think this one was handled very well. I think it was handled excellent. The GIs were good, and the 29th Division was good doing everything, and I had a ball. I really.
You had some nice. I'm going to just hand you a picture to tie in with this. You had some nice experiences over
Yeah.
this time, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And
I had experiences galore.
and I'm going to try to get that on the camera here. You're holding I got you holding a picture of you with somebody who looks familiar. You want to tell a little bit about the background of this?
Yeah. Well, this time on the 65th anniversaries, they had all the French, English, Canadian, and American veterans on the stage behind the president. And when they finished speaking, well, I kind of rushed over and saw the president and went over there, and Amy grabbed him, and we had a picture taken with the president of the United States. That was such a great experience. And and during the same time, I met and talked to the Prince of Wales, talked to his attaché, and then I even shook the hand of the Prime Minister of Canada. I met a whole bunch of generals, 3 or 4 four-star generals, the general in charge of the ETO. So it was the greatest experience. It was handled very well. I spent Memorial Day with the British 1st Airborne Division at Trevor, where I left for Normandy. That was great. It was just a great experience all around.
Was that the Treyba experience? Was that right at the very beach where you had boarded the?
Right at the very beach where we left, and they had a picture where somebody had drawn, and it looked very similar to what I remembered. Yeah, it was great. In fact, I think the idea of having the veterans behind the dignitaries was great. We met a lot of great people. We had dinners at great chateaus. They fed us like kings. We all gained weight. The trip was great. The whole experience was just wonderful.
It was for the 65th, and I was with you for part of that trip, and I know that you led the dedication ceremony of the Hill 108 monument at Villiers-Façade, and then you were out on the battlefield. You walked us around there to see and talked a little bit about that, and I was particularly touched to see how the people of Isigny treated the veterans, and I know that they do that. Watching you all pull in on that bus was very emotional to see those townspeople there.
Yeah.
It was very sweet, a very nice experience.
Yeah, it was great there. I don't know if you get to Le Camp. They wanted us to go to Le Camp, and Bill and I agreed that we would go, even though it was kind of pressed for time. But the mayor just was, so wishing we would come. So we went there, and they had a whole bunch of kids. We had experience talking to children in the different schools we went to. I think we had 3 groups of children. I mean, it was just wonderful.
And the kids are very interested, aren't they?
Yes, the kids are very interested, and I think the French people are passing it on to their children and their grandchildren and so forth. And yes, they are. I have mementos from a couple of the kids. They gave me drawings and letters, and I've had pictures that they've sent me and newspapers they've sent me. It just was a great experience. The people there just are wonderful.
Mm-hmm. The rest of your experience back in the 65th anniversary, I know you went to Vire as well again. Did you?
Yes.
You saw Vire and
Yes.
How does France look now as opposed to when you were there 65 years ago?
I think it look, as far as I could see, it looks pretty much the same. I think that maybe the 60th, some of the cities were able to put out more flags and things like that. But I think what they do, I think they treat the even years like a little more, like the 50th, 60th, 70th are more, I don't know what you want to call it, more significant to them. But it was great. I didn't really notice any difference. I thought everything was handled well by Fran and the 29th Division Association and the generals and the 29th Division troops that came with us. I think everything was, I just had a great time. It couldn't have been better. It was perfect.
Yeah, you're describing the way the tour was run, the way the trip
Right.
was run. It was a very nice, very nice trip.
Yes.
Your memories of they go back 60. You've had 65 years of life after a pretty hard time. You were raised during the Depression. You had you were toughened up. You had good teachers in school. You had a teacher who cared for you, and you were toughened up with your work at the shipyard. I think that you were you were ready for you dealt with things, right?
Yes, I think probably, yeah, the fact that, I was in a private and I finished as a tech sergeant. Actually, I was active first sergeant. But a lot of that is luck of the draw, you're in the right place or not. But yeah, I felt that I had a very distinct feeling I wanted to come back. And I wanted the guys that were with me to have that same attitude so we all could come back. So I was not a trained sergeant. I was just a battlefield sergeant. So
Yeah.
I knew how to take care of things, and that's the way I ran my ship. We wanted to come back.
I've heard other veterans say that they put the war behind them when they got back home, and just a normalcy kind of thing. You
Yes.
felt that for a long time.
Yes.
And you'd rather have that memory tucked away
Yes.
in terms of your life, in
Yeah.
terms of just getting on.
Yeah, because I think you see it. Sometimes you more so probably in Vietnam where the fellas were mentally affected by it. They got into trouble because of what happened during that war, and so it's good to put that aside, and we were able to do that. Yeah, I think I'm glad we were able to do that.
If we had talked to you 30 years ago, would your family have known about what you did in the war 30 years ago?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think, and I think Joe Belkowski feels the same way. It was a shame that maybe if somebody had talked to us in the 50s, maybe some of us would have opened up, and maybe we could have told more of actually what happened because it was fresh in our memories.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the bad things, but where we were and how we did it, as long as that other was kept out of it. But now I think we've forgotten it, and then I think some of the guys are mixing up what they read, and maybe I did some of that. I don't know what they read, but I try to keep telling people I don't remember. I'd rather say that than try to say something that I'm not sure of.
Well, that's okay, and it's a good thing that you've come out and talked a little bit more. I think that's
Yeah.
a pretty important
Right.
important thing, and for you and your family to have been over to France a few times and to
Yeah.
have been treated as rightfully as. Now, what do you think of subsequent generations? What do you think? Did you have a hard time with my generation understanding what not having been through anything like that?
No, I don't have a mind for that. I'm okay with that, and I can understand. I think that maybe I blamed the school system more for that. That they, like when we went to school, we had to have history, and we had to learn certain things, and we had to observe certain things. And I don't think they do that anymore. But maybe it's because there's too many other things that are in the way, like computers and television. We didn't have that, so that was our thing to observe the holidays more. But I don't have any feelings about that. No, I don't feel bad about that. No.
Any closing thoughts about your memories of World War II and how it changed your life?
Oh yeah,
What do you
I
got?
think. Let me say this. I can remember a story when I said I was going to go to college, the University of Rhode Island. I had he wasn't exactly a man in the neighborhood who knew me very well, and he questioned the fact that I was going to lose the money that I could have made in the shipyard versus the experience I could get to better myself. He didn't think it was worth it, but I know it was well worth it. And when I went to school, as I mentioned earlier, my wife and I knew that if I could finish the schooling, that would make a much better life. It changed my life. How am I going to say it? If I had gone and made a fighter pilot, would I be here? Had I gone on D-Day, would I be here?